Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. So in today's video, I want to be talking about hypertrophy and breaking down that term into two, which is myofibrillar hypertrophy and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So for many of you, you may have heard of the term hypertrophy or muscle gain, but you may not be aware that it's actually broken down even further into two forms of hypertrophy. So today, I want to be talking about the two different forms, what sort of results you'll get from them, so you can then pick which one you would ideally like to choose, what are the benefits, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the rep ranges which are going to actually dictate the proportion of what you're going to get. And this goes into a little bit of detail of my previous video where I was talking about rep ranges and how they dictate what our goals are and how do we train for them. There was a brief point where I was talking about the 5 to 8 rep range and different things like that, and I briefly spoke about myofibrillar hypertrophy and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, but I thought I'll do its own video so I can explain it in further detail for you guys so you can have a better understanding of what you're going for when you're training, what sort of results you're going to get, and then you can pick which one you would prefer to have. So we're going to be looking at it, and I've broken this down into a chart, or I've written down some of the benefits or what each one actually is and a definition of what we're going for. So obviously we're talking about hypertrophy, so this is building muscle, okay? So the first one we're going to be looking at is myofibrillar. So this is the typical rep range. We're going to be working usually around maybe 1 to 5 is where you're really going to be stimulating the most of it. But I have talked about how you could get that slight benefit if you were working in the 5 to 8 rep range. But the primary focus of what we're going to be going for and the way that you're training is because we need to be lifting heavy. So this is a high intensity we're going to be looking at, probably anything from 75, but ideally 85% and up. This is sort of the reps where you're doing your 5 reps and lower. So it's something that is going to be very, very challenging. And it doesn't have to be something like weighted calisthenics, or it can just be literally a pull-up where you are doing and you're struggling to say do 5 reps. That's where we're going to be working in this sort of intensity range, and the main thing we're going to be working on, or the hypertrophy that we will be gaining from lifting with that higher intensity, is myofibrillar. So the benefits or the adaptations that we get from here is we are increasing our myofibrillar size, and this is caused by heavy lifting, which causes trauma to the muscles. So the idea that you're breaking down the muscle, you're creating these little micro tears in the muscle, it basically, the body then treats it, and body will try and overcompensate and will increase the volume and the density of the myofibrillar. So if you break them down even further, they get broken down into actin and myosin, and these are the things that are actually contracting. They kind of lock into each other, and that is the whole idea of how muscles actually work. That sort of, they latch onto each other and they pull. That's the idea of how muscles actually work and move. So what we're actually doing is the actin and the myosin, we're increasing the number of them, which is going to be increasing the strength that we have, and obviously you will develop some size from that as well. So what we're actually doing is we're breaking down the muscle because we're lifting to a high intensity. We're lifting something that's very, very heavy that is going to cause damage or trauma to the body, and the way that the body then responds to that is by increasing the number of myofibrillar, so the actin and the myosin, the actual contractile proteins that are responsible for actually moving things. Increase the number of them, and obviously we're going to be increasing the volume and the density of them. So this is why when you're lifting heavy, you will get strong, because you're actually increasing the number and the volume of those actual contractile proteins. And that's the important thing when we're lifting heavy. This is why you get stronger, as well as the adaptations to your central nervous system. So the other thing we're going to be looking at is a sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So this is a sort of the rep range 8 to 12 and plus that you're going to typically see within bodybuilders. And this is where you're going to see the comparison between the two. The myofibrillar could be sort of strength training people, gymnasts, powerlifters, strongmen, and then here we're going to be looking more sort of like the bodybuilders. And this is why there's a big discrepancy. Obviously, taking aside people taking performance enhancing drugs, this is why you'll get some bodybuilders or people that are very, very big and muscular, but then they don't look as strong as what they should be with the amount of size that they have. And this is why you can get some powerlifters that aren't a very heavy weight, but they're able to lift a very, very large amount of weight because they focus more on this adaptation to the body, where you're actually increasing the strength by actual contractile protein. So the sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, this is the rep range where we've been working, where it's about 8 to 12 and plus, and the intensity is lower. We're not lifting as heavier weights where it's going to be causing as much of a damage or a trauma to the body, where the body then has to recompensate and build more. So the size that we're going to be creating, because you'll notice when people do this form of training, or bodybuilders, they tend to be very, very big and they look very muscular, as if they've actually built a load of muscle, like pure hard muscle. They look like that, where actually they're actually increasing their glycogen storage. They're actually increasing the size of the cytoplasm fluid and the energy resources that are surrounding the myofibrillar. So the actual contractile tissue, the one that's actually responsible for movement and actually engaging and then latching onto each other, the sliding filament theory, that's what it's called, where they actually latch onto each other, and that's how we create movement in the muscles. They're actually surrounding the myofibrillar, so you've got the actin and the myosin, the contractile proteins. That's the sarcoplasm surrounds that. That sarcoplasm, it actually holds ATP, glycogen, creatine phosphate, and water. So the actual energy sources of those muscles. That's what the sarcoplasm holds, and it surrounds the myofibrillar. So the size gain is due to the increase of sarcoplasm, and it adds volume, but it does not grow the fibers. This is why some people will say that when you're working in this rep range, you're not building functional size. Where down here you're building functional size, because here you're actually increasing the volume and the density of the myofibrillars, which are the actin and the myosin, and they're the ones that are actually the sliding filament theory, where they're actually creating movement of the muscle. Where if you're over here, you're just increasing the size because you're increasing the sarcoplasm, which holds the energy resources. So that's just why it's very common where when you're working in this rep range, it's about depleting those energy resources. So again, if you keep depleting these energy resources in the muscles, you'll go into the fatigue, you'll go into that burn, and then you're having a very, very short rest period, and you're smashing it again and again and again. You're depleting these energy sources, and basically what it's telling your body to do is, I need to increase the amount of sarcoplasm because I need more energy resources to be able to do this amount of work. So when you're focusing in this rep range and you're focusing on, I guess, this more of adaptation where you're really only focused on, I just want size for the sake of size, this is the adaptations you're making. Yes, you will grow some fibers, you will grow a bit of strength because you are still training the muscles to a degree, but the proportion of the actual adaptation is the increase of volume and density of the actual contractile proteins is a lot less to you than just focusing on growing size for the sake of growing size. And from my experience, this form of training, because you're focusing on energy resources, if you take a step back or you don't train for a while, or you get injured or something else comes up, and you don't have this need to keep this high energy resource, this is a sort of size you lose a lot quicker. I've done things where I've been doing more higher rep stuff and I've circuits and other things like that. When you stop doing this form of training, you lose size very, very quickly. It's why a lot of bodybuilders, other than them taking a step back or stopping taking their performance enhancing drugs, you lose size a lot quickly. Where if you're actually on here, you're actually building contractile tissue, you're building actual real tissue that has a use that is actually a lot easier. Once you build it, it's a lot easier to maintain. All you need to do is lift heavy or still fairly heavy, and you're actually keeping the muscle tissue. The other reason why this is a better form as well is because actually having muscle mass on you burns more calories. So you're actually, to be able to help maintain a good body weight, you want to be having muscle, and a lot of muscle burns more calories. So technically you're actually building more functional size, and that's actually going to impact on your overall calorie expenditure, which means it's going to be a lot easier to maintain size or cut or whatever your fitness goals are. So I wanted to go into detail and explain what the different terms are, what sort of the adaptations your body are going to be making, so you guys can then decide, okay, well, if I just focus on size, all I care about is size, I don't care about any of the other things, then focus on this. You're probably going to build size a lot faster than you will here, because it's a lot easier to build up this fluid than it is to actually build contractile tissue. But if you want to be able to train and not only build muscle but actually have strength to show, then this is going to be the rep range or the type of hypertrophy that you want to be focusing on. The other thing is as well is that this isn't a one or either. It's going to be, there will be a slight overlap on how these work. So, you know, depending on how far you go, what your reps are in different rest periods and things like this, because obviously with this, the rest period is low because you're really just trying to tap into those energy reserves and basically fatigue the muscle and basically create that need to create more of the fluid resources. So you have a short rest period, where this is about having a longer rest period, because you need to be able to lift heavy and keep that intensity high to be able to create these micro traumas in the muscle for the body to overcompensate and to recover and increase volume and density of the myofibrillar. So this is why you need a longer rest, because you need to keep that intensity high to be able to do that. So a good middle ground to be able to play with, I've always said, if you do the 5 to 8 rep range, that's a good middle ground. But another thing you possibly do is you could dedicate either in the session or separate sessions where you focus on lifting heavy in one session or at the beginning of your session, and then you might want to do a little bit of pump stuff to be able to grab that little bit of size so you get the benefits of both worlds. But guys, I hope you found that video useful, quite in depth. I've tried to get as much info as I can so you guys can make an informed decision on how you want to dedicate your training and what results you know you're going to get from depending on what you do. So I hope you found this video useful. Please share it to someone else that you think will also find this interesting. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure that you subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notified of whenever I upload. And if you have any questions, please comment down below and I'll do my best to help you out. With that out of the way, guys, I'll see you in the next video.